Are you lost in the chaotic whirlwind of day-to-day busyness? Do you yearn for a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Welcome to Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose, the podcast dedicated to empowering women on their journey of self-discovery and finding their true purpose through their own story. I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. Welcome to the podcast, my friends. Today, my guest is April Emanuelson. She is a mom of three, a wife, a farmer, a national speaker, and New York Times bestselling author, a retreat host, and last but not least, she is a gut health and nutrition nerd. She is a certified lifestyle exercise attitude and nutrition coach, and she's certified in functional medicine. She loves teaching simple tools that can help even the busiest of people to make lasting changes to better their health. She specializes in setting up a targeted plan based on your own unique system and life picture. And I'm so excited to have you here today, April. Can you tell us a little bit about your own story and what led you to where you're at today?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I can only ever remember not feeling well. I was a caring kiddo. I love animals and people, and I'd always wanted to be a doctor. But I always had kind of tummy issues. Just kind of felt kind of icky sometimes, tired. You know, when you don't know any better, you're like, oh, I guess that's just life, or you're too little to articulate it. But when I was 19, I crashed. Actually, it probably started even my senior year in high school where I was barely getting out of bed. I really felt trapped in my own body. I had this, desire to go to medical school, but I didn't even know how I would get out of bed. So I really dove into trying to find answers because I got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue by the Western doctors I idealized, and nothing against that. I knew that there was more answers than that, and that there could be something that we could do versus learn to live with it. And so that's what got me on my more holistic journey. And I did go see a naturopath that diagnosed me with, I think I was really sensitive to over 50 foods, and many of my highest sensitivity
Wow.
I was eating every single day. So, that would have been nice to know a little sooner in life. And then when I was able to kind of reset and heal my gut and avoid most of those foods, I know that sounds impossible, but it wasn't. I really got my life back and then some. And that's the beginning of my story. There's many other layers to that. I think you're going to ask me about my kiddos and things like that too.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you think chronic fatigue syndrome is that just kind of a catch-all for you're just tired all the time and we don't know why?
Yeah, I might get in trouble for this, but I feel like chronic fatigue is a catch-all. I feel like eczema is a catch-all. I feel like fibromyalgia is a catch-all. There's a lot of things you have a root cause that aren't just, you've got this.
Well, and so your root cause was food allergies or sensitivities. Um, is that generally the case, or can it be a wide range of things?
The longer story of that is that my system was so sensitive to foods, my immune system was going, that's an invader, because I didn't realize that I probably was always fairly sensitive to gluten, not anaphylactically, but I find it super interesting that I think our generation was the first time they saw it skip the gut reaction and just go straight to the brain. I had the gut reaction and also the fatigue and the blues that comes along with what they're seeing with gluten nowadays. But I ended up finding out that I've had chronic Lyme for a really long time, and it was probably since I was a kid. And so my system, and I don't remember ever having the bullseye rash. I mean, I definitely had to,
Hmm.
because I was a forest rat. Um, and so it's something that I probably had a long time, and my immune system was just deciding, just kind of in chaos, trying to figure out what was wrong and deciding things were wrong.
And Lyme is so difficult to diagnose too. So do you think that was the underlying cause then?
Probably. Yeah. It's hard to say. There's so many layers to it. There's also genetic susceptibility. So Lyme we were going to go on to another question too. I think we were nerding out
And
when
we are nerding out.
I know,
What
we
I
met,
love to do.
we met at the Rejuvenate You event. And So it's one of those things where there's so many layers of it all, right? So I
Right.
know that we've talked about biotoxins, you and I. There is a certain subset of the population that's like, it's about 25% that are susceptible to them. So one person can get Lyme, clear it fine, and not have an issue really. 25% of the population, if they have this genetic susceptibility, they will get it and it will become a problem where they then have chronic Lyme, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I've got a friend of mine who got Lyme as a young adult, but didn't realize it. And she actually passed it in utero to all five of her kids. And you did too. Yeah. Yeah. So it was
My daughters don't have the genetic susceptibility, but he does, and I did. Yes.
okay. So let's go into that. So you had your first son and
Yeah.
he really struggled. So tell us that story.
Yeah, so, I felt like I had my life back and then some, and so I decided to study abroad and I met my husband who's in special forces and we were touring different countries and then whirlwind romance, got married at 6 months of dating. And when we ended up in our first duty station, I was like, I was like, okay, I'm back to medical school. But then I was like, why am I doing this? Like back to the idea of medical school, I should say, finishing up my senior year. And I was like, why am I doing this? That it didn't make sense. I mean, I was just starting to like put my feet in place to an idea that I had that really didn't fit my life anymore. And so I was 23 and I was like, anything's possible. And I decided instead, I had a girlfriend that was a sommelier at the Maison de Ville Hotel in New Orleans, and she was getting like mugged every night. And I was like, you know what? I'm newly married. I'm like telling this story that I've never told ever before, so I'm being vulnerable here. I am home alone a lot. He's overseas a lot. Why don't you come up and we'll like start a gift store or something, or we'll do something, get you out of that city. And she was like, let's start a wine bar. And I was like,
Well, that's fun.
okay, well, maybe we'll make it a gift store slash wine bar. It ended up
Right.
becoming art gallery wine bar. And it was really fun. It was an extreme amount of stress. And so there's this other component, right? When we're stressed, we also have where our immune system just says, forget it.
Right.
You're stressed. I don't know what to do. I give up, right? And so when I got pregnant, I was still in that situation working 80 hours a week. And thank goodness my best friend was like, I'm in between stuff. I'll come help you manage. And so that's how I got through it. And I actually sold the wine bar the day I delivered my son. So there's that component where it was, highly stressful pregnancy. And he came out with like everything I had and then some, right? Eczema, way
Right.
anaphylactic peanut allergy, and the list is long.
So how did you discover all of that? I mean, so and obviously he had so many things that he just wasn't thriving then. So how did you figure all of that out to where he could be in a place to thrive?
Yeah. Um, I was kind of like I mean, I knew he was unhappy because he had a lot of colic, right? And so then I love Dr. Sears. He had his baby book that's like the baby Bible, right? That's about this
Yeah.
great paperweight. Just kidding. Um, I was like madly looking through things, and so I took wheat and dairy out of my diet, which I had already pretty much taken out um, for the most part, but I didn't know at the time, like even just a little bit here and there. Isn't that silly?
Yeah.
Um, that I really should avoid. So that I was like, oh, I feel so much better once I completely was religious about it, right? Um, and so that helped a little bit. And then when he was one, anyway, it's a much longer story. He's vaccine sensitive. He got his MMR vaccine and really had a horrible reaction, stopped making eye contact. And when I came in the living room one day and I had set him to play with toys and he was hitting his head, just sitting there, hitting his head against the wall. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is autism spectrum. And so I found a specialist at the time. I was like, I don't want this to be his picture. Like I will do anything and everything. And so I found a specialist, had her MD, her naturopathic degree, and her doctorate in physical chemistry. So three doctorates. And I flew him to Baton Rouge to see her and go to her clinic. Um, and she did all kinds of comprehensive tests. He was high in heavy metals, he was high in candida. Um, he certainly had his food sensitivities as well, lots of different things going on. And so she made a doable plan. Here's the other aspect of things, right? You can go, for me with the food sensitivities at first, I was super stringent. Like I would avoid things at all costs, right? And then as I felt better, I would just like, sneak things back in, like I was saying. Um, and you can only live so stringent so long. And so I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to do this for a little guy? How are we going to?
Right.
And so she said, well, once you calm the immune system down, it won't be so reactive to everything. And so we didn't even know about Lyme at the time. This was more like she wasn't Lyme literate, but she definitely helped take all of that load down in an easy way.
Okay, so it's almost like it's the buildup of a lot of different things can cause, that's what causes so many problems, right? So it's
Yeah,
the
I love when
overload.
you say that. Yeah, because I think about it as like a clogged tub. You're okay for so long, and then you start having this spillover effect, or a clogged toilet, where at a certain weight, it's almost like it just flushes through, and you feel better for a little while, and then it gets clogged again. So you have these moments of like, why do I feel so awful today? And then your drain unclogs, and you feel better for a few days, and then it's this kind of vicious cycle.
I've heard the analogy as a rain barrel. There's a book called The Rain Barrel Effect. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I've heard that statement, but no, I haven't read it.
Yeah, so the idea is you've got the drain coming down for, like say you've got like your roof and the rain comes down the drain and it drains into a rain barrel and your body can only handle so much toxins before it spills over and that's when that spillage is when you get all of the different side effects and the different reactions and your immune system shutting down. And so you have to reduce those amount of toxins so you don't get that spillage. And it's a um,
And it's
constant cycle.
something that they saw, kind of the phenomenon was that people would have that, oh, my scale is tipped at around 50, that's when like, oh, everything breaks, right? No, that's
Right.
really toxic load. But they're seeing it younger and younger and younger. People in their 20s having these, I mean, even kids like type 2 diabetes wasn't even a thing for.
Right. And really that's all it is their bodies can't handle all of the toxins and so it's reacting. Oh, that's really fascinating. And it's sad, isn't it, that you see that in children. And so the challenge then becomes, okay, well, how can we clear out the rain barrel? How do we flush out all of these biotoxins? And so I want to kind of get into that. So explain to us what a biotoxin is, and then how can we manage that?
Yeah, so biotoxins are like my new passion because it's not even something I knew about. Probably, goodness, before I started working for the functional clinic I work for now, Dr. Rana is an amazing clinician and just let me sit in on a bunch of functional medical training that she was doing continuing. She was a doctor of nursing practice, and then she just started kind of researching and trying to figure out what is going on in our world, right? And the more she learned, she was like, whoa, we're doing this wrong. We need to like
Yeah.
do the functional side. And so in essence, biotoxins are there's about 40 different biotoxins. Candida is a biotoxin, Lyme is a biotoxin, mold is a biotoxin, COVID acts like a biotoxin. Um, there's like, fishborne illnesses, different things. Like if you've ever had food poisoning, that can be something that continues to live in your body if you're one of the lucky 25%.
Yeah.
Spider bites. And a lot of people think Lyme is something that you can only get from ticks. You can actually get Lyme from parasites, cats, mosquitoes,
Really?
off the top of my head.
Yeah. I did
Yeah,
not know that.
yeah, super crazy.
So these biotoxins build up and build up. So how can you manage them so that you were continuing to flush them rather than store them?
Yeah. That's well, so like I said, it's about 75% of the population's off the hook if they keep their immune system on point and they can clear them themselves, right? So
Hmm.
that's that question of is their toxic load? What are they eating? What are they exposing themselves to in the environment? I think about my son who I don't even know if we're allowed to call foods out, but like Cheerios was one of his first foods. It's one of the highest um exposures of glyphosate out there. So I was feeding him something I thought was a healthy first food, and it was causing leaky gut. It acts like an antibiotic and it wipes out your good guys and causes all kinds of inflammation. So we can also think we're doing the right thing and not know, and have these
Right.
things occur. Um, and so in essence, if your immune system's on point, you're one of the lucky 75%. Awesome. You're going to be fine. If you're one of the 25% and your body literally, like mold is one of my favorite examples, you can't build an antibody to it. It grows and lives in your body much like candida, and it does things like shuts down your thyroid, causes weight gain, I mean, I've had people with like psychosis, there's mold psychosis. Um,
Wow.
the list is long. And some of the things like the weight gain, the thyroid hormone disruption, they think, oh, that's aging, right? No, if you're one of the 25% and you've been exposed to mold, it can be that. And then so binding that would be more targeted. It's probably a longer conversation, but if you want to dive into the subject, my favorite book on the subject is Toxic by Dr. Neil Nathan. It's an amazing, amazing book.
Okay. I'm going to write that down because I will link that um to in our show notes. So Toxic by who?
Dr. Neil Nathan, and it's something that it's almost like an encyclopedia where you can flip to different chapters. One of the things, actually, I was just talking to a friend about it today. When your body's just like, okay, I've really had enough, or you're sensitive, you've been working on it, and then you have a re-exposure, you can have mast cell activation. They have this with long haul COVID. And your body's just like, that's it. I'm having histamine reaction to everything, foods, you know, t- touching a plant, all of these things, and
Right.
it's your body's on like massive alert, right? So I love that I just flipped that section of the book today to like, okay, I got to brush up on what do you do?
That's
Where
awesome.
quercetin's a really good first start. He really makes it so step by step, and he gives natural solutions and pharmaceutical solutions because some people do better with the natural solutions. Some people respond to the pharmaceuticals better.
That's really cool. And that's really interesting because I feel like sometimes the two camps of the natural medicine versus the Western medicine really go at it and don't like each other. So that's really awesome that he allows for, what works for your body. I've
He,
not actually not seen that before at all. So that's really cool.
Dr. Sears is that way as well, which I really
He is
appreciate about about
very
him.
cool. That's awesome. So I'm curious, you keep talking about the 75-25, but it's not necessarily 75 are all in one camp and 25 are all in the other, right? I mean, you could have 75-25 for mold, 75-25 for, each
Yeah,
one, right? Or how does that work?
there's kind of, yeah, and I'm kind of oversimplifying there. There's people that would be like mold susceptible or doubly mold susceptible. They have a few genes that make them more mold susceptible. Then there's people that would just be Lyme susceptible or chronic fatigue susceptible. That is a thing where more like you're more prone to toxic load issues, right? Um,
Hmm.
and then there's the multi-susceptible where you're just susceptible to all of it. And that's me,
Right.
and that's my son.
Yay. You got
Thanks so
you
much.
you you got the lucky draw, right?
And it's funny too, because I think, these are things that if I hadn't learned this so young, right? I was 20, um, I was 18, 19 when I learned about food and being careful about what I was eating. So not only did I know that there was these food sensitivities, but then that's when I started going, well, whoa, chemicals in food, all of the things. I started eating more plant-based. And then when my son was born, gosh, how old was I? Can't believe I can't remember, 27. Then I learned the next level of, candida and all of these different things and taking that load off and heavy metals and where we get exposed. So I think to myself, gosh, if I had just kept going and had no idea, what would my life look like now? And then we
Yeah.
also have people that, really struggle. So my mother-in-law I always tell her story. She's mold susceptible. She was living in a moldy condo in Florida until she retired. And she was also, single, working nights, wasn't necessarily cooking for herself, just eating what was convenient. And so when she moved in with us, she was 50 pounds heavier. So she started eating the whole food diet that, we were eating because she wanted to learn and started feeling a little better, taking once an hour, she'd do 250 steps around her kitchen island. She's lost 50 pounds and she walks about 5 miles a day now. And she's in her 70s. Like it's never too late, which I also love.
But removing that mold
Mhm.
influence probably allowed her to be able to do that. That combined with the good food, that's really amazing.
Actually, the story on that was that no, we she moved
Oh,
in and we discovered mold in our house. So
oh.
it
I
um
assumed too much.
I know it was outside of that little what do they call that? I can't remember when your control. That was not
Right.
so, but nice thought.
Right.
But certainly as we have, and then that's the thing too. Even if you remove yourself from the environment and you're the mold susceptible like she was, I mean, it certainly was less of an onslaught, but it still didn't matter because it was in her body. It was
She still
doing,
had to flush it out.
yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. So I talked with you earlier about my daughter. So I'm gonna tell this story again because I think it's so gross. But she was at college and she kept having these just nasty headaches. And at first I thought, well, because she just had her wisdom teeth out. So I thought, well, maybe it's her wisdom teeth, something wrong with that. And I went down this whole rabbit hole there. And I just had this thought one day, I wonder if it's mold, and I brought that up to her. I said, do you think maybe because her dorm where she was living in, I mean, my parents lived in the same dorm. Like it's that it's that old. I mean, it's like old, old.
Yeah.
And she was like, "No, no, I can't see anything," and so her bed is right next to or was right next to the window. Well, she had covered that window up with, curtains and everything, and she never opened the curtains. And so it was facing east, so it would get this morning sun, it would just kind of bake. And she said that she opened it one day to clean and it was just covered in this black mold, just covered. And her face was right next to it every night she slept.
So, and
And and it was so bad. And she was the only one of her roommates that was reacting. I mean, of course she was right next to it, but she had a roommate who didn't have any issues at all with it. And so she got it all cleaned up and reported it and said, "Hey, there's black mold here." And of course, they came out and it was like they were like, "Well, it's not there anymore," and so black mold spores, they don't, they're still around even if you can't see them. So as she was leaving to come home, they had to do these cleaning inspections, and she had found it again all around her door frame this time.
yikes.
And they hadn't ever noticed. And her roommate had gotten this air filter, one of those that kind of senses the air. And if it's okay, it shuts off. Never once went off. The
Mhm.
whole time it was just going, going, going. And sure enough, as soon as she got home, she started to feel a lot better. But yeah, it's crazy. So I think she's got a mold susceptibility and that it was building up this last year while she was there. So we've got some work to do with her.
I, I was going to say, you and I we'll talk
Yes.
about that you should have her on. Um, And then I will say too that, that's indicative of what is actually in the walls or somewhere, maybe in the flooring, who knows, because the moisture around windows, it allows the spores to land and grow, but they don't actually grow on windows unless it's in somewhere in an enclosed space. Mold only grows in a place that doesn't have airflow and is wet. So
Yeah.
you have a leak and you put it in a wall that doesn't have any airflow, it just grows like crazy, right? It's
Right.
not the window's fault. It's what's in behind something you cannot see.
Exactly. Okay, so how do you get rid of all of these biotoxins? And I'm sure it's different for everybody, but what are some, if somebody is just starting out and just going, I don't feel that great, maybe I've got this issue, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, I love the VCS test, the visual contrast sensitivity test. It will look at neurological load and whether or not it'll give you a positive or negative for like biotoxin score. It'll also look at whether or not there's a nutritional deficiency and then whether or not you're one of the susceptible. So they're or susceptible to Herxheimer's reaction. So some people will like go, okay, that's it. I feel icky. I'm going to go on a detox, and they feel so bad they can't get through it because they are
Hmm.
literally having a Herx reaction, right?
So what
And
does that mean, a Herx reaction?
basically, when more toxins are dying off than the body can eliminate. So that can be
Got
from
it.
like poor methylation, poor digestion, poor elimination, which is part of the methylation, but also that's a whole nother genetic, topic.
Right, right.
But so if they don't have their detox pathways open, they're going to feel really, really awful. And so it's nice to know on this test, yes, biotoxins, yes, nutritional deficiency, yes, Herx susceptible. So then we can go very carefully um, in terms of getting the biotoxins out. And then it's pretty simple. It's like you can it's free if you just want a positive or negative, but it's only $15 if you want the full report, and it'll tell you exactly, it'll show you all the columns and where things are off. And then it also has an assessment at the end that can talk about something else, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome, or CIRS, where if you have all of these things, because of biotoxin illness, like how likely is it that you would have that as a diagnosis? And when you have that going on, it's because the secondary immune system is super inflamed and reacting. And and I love Dr. Neil Nathan. He's very kind because he kind of wrote the book for clinicians. He said, be very patient with these clients because they've been told they're crazy. They've been told it's hormones. They've been told all of these things when indeed they're very, very sick and need extra help, So understand that these aren't things that you can, see with our traditional tests right now. You can have someone that's incredibly inflamed and their immune system is just totally on fire and their CRP is fine, which is like,
Hmm.
we'll look at C-reactive protein as the kind of a litmus test of whether or not they have inflammation.
It's so interesting. So I had this test done and it was really, really enlightening. But what was super interesting to me was how the test was done. So you actually it's a visual test and you're basically lining up lines and but the lines get fainter and fainter and fainter. And so can you explain like how does that even correlate
Yeah.
to to what's going on inside of your body?
Yeah. It's it's probably a little beyond I'm not a neurologist, right? But in essence, actually it was funny because my daughter, who's another story, was being assessed for depth perception and whether or not she could see certain gradient of lines. I'm like using my fingers as this funny little
Right.
example, right? If she could see certain gradients, then she has depth perception. If not, she doesn't. So it kind of borrows on that because you're looking at these gradient of lines and they're really small or they're larger. And depending on the gradient and whether or not your eye is seeing it, it can say, nope, that's, you saw it here, didn't see it here. It's assessing what you can see and what those particular um, shapes, in essence, or gradient correlates with mold illness or biotoxins. And
Hmm.
the other ones correlate with nutritional deficiencies and so on and so forth. So it's really, I don't have the exact answer, but it's in essence that.
It's really fascinating though, because I believe our body tells us what's going on. We just don't know how to interpret it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and we don't know how to listen.
I see this all the time, especially with moms and women, you'll go like, I wonder if it's mold. Like, where did that come from? There was zero like
Right. It was
thought
just this
other than
thought
just
that
like,
came, oh, I wonder if that's mold. Right.
Yeah. So we will have these amazing intuitions, right? But we are usually taught to not trust our intuitions.
Or we bring that up to a trusted source and we're shot down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
happens, I
So
think, a lot.
I will often like say, oh, it'd be really great if you could get this, and this test, just to know like the genetic susceptibility, right?
Right.
And someone will take it to their doctor in a different state. I wish everyone was here in Washington State. We would, everyone could go to the clinic, but
Right.
they can't. So I'll like send people off with this idea and go, I hope your doctor will do it. And some doctors are like, sure, I don't know how to read that though, but I'm open and they'll do it.
Right.
Others will be like, there's no need for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do like to say, if you have a doctor like that, maybe find a different one because technically we practitioners work for you. If we're not meeting your needs,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, we're the ones that control that. Yeah, and really that's a lesson in speaking up for yourself too and taking control of your own life, you know? So, yeah, that's super cool.
you know,
So, how do you like what are some good foods that we can use as a I guess what I'm saying is we often hear of food as medicine. So is that again like are there like some general foods that are just always good, or is even that individual to the person?
it can be. Actually, it's interesting that specialist that I took my son to, she really believed in the eat right for your blood type diet.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
there was real science around how if you have an O type, you're, one of the oldest blood type, more caveman like. In fact, this is a funny story. I did 23andMe because I don't even remember why I started out doing it. I think I had started to learn about MTHFR. They were having like a Black Friday sale. It was half off, and you can download your raw genetic material data from 23andMe or Ancestry, and you can upload it into a program called Genetic Genie that's free. And so I was just trying to get my DNA information, right? Um, and because Izzy, who's had some other issues, again, another story for a different day, had midline issues, and so that is an MT is very common with MTHFR. So I wanted to know if I had it, and if I had somehow that is what had gone on for her. So long story short, oh my gosh, I think I just squirrel brained. So I'm like, I was saying something for a reason about that genetics. Okay, it just bloop. Sometimes my brain goes faster than my words, and then I go, oh,
Yeah, that happens to me too. I'm trying to remember what my original question was. Oh, are food
oh,
as
foods. Thank
medicine?
you. Foods.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So, funny story is that I am 98% more caveman than most people. So, I did this whole thing like foods medicine, and I actually learned about an easy way to just get a lot of plants into my son, and it really did help his inflammation. So I was like, plants are amazing. I
Yeah.
don't have to take this product though, so I'm going to do it myself. And I got a juicer, a Vitamix, a dehydrator, and we went raw vegan because I'm a little crazy sometimes. And my immune system crashed. I mean, it was kind of like I felt better in some ways, but it was like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back.
Right.
For me, bio individually, I was not like benefiting from being vegan. I actually needed more, vitamin A, vitamin D, ADAC, they call it, right? There are people that need fat soluble vitamins more than others, in my opinion. Um, However, I do love to like I am a huge easy button person. First of all, I just ended up going back on the concentrated plants because I was like, okay, easy button, I'll just do that from now on.
Right.
And I kind of dug into the company and had a lot of I felt like I got my questions answered and I felt confident in what I was taking because there's not a lot of regulation in the supplement industry, and so
Right.
you don't know what you're getting sometimes, right? And then so I actually went to a nutraceutical conference and I got to hear Dr. Furman, who, first of all, I think he's a vampire. Sorry, Dr. podcast. Just kidding. Because he's in his mid 70s and he does not have a single wrinkle. He's fit as a fiddle. And I'm just like, how does he look like that? You know? And he has been studying nutrition forever. So his philosophy is a nutritarian diet where you eat as many nutrient-dense plants as possible. And so then he was like, and then what does that mean? Isn't, and he had the audience kind of raise their hand and was like, do you know what nutrient-dense plants are? Like which ones you should focus on? And like no one raised their hands. He's like, there's so much confusion out there, right? So he said,
Right.
let's keep it simple. And these are the foods that are the most impactful on your health. And he calls them G bombs. And you can Google Dr. Furman and G bombs, but it's G is for greens. And he puts a dash, right? It's like G dash bombs. And he said, I put that
Yeah.
dash there for a reason so people would pay attention to greens. Greens are like where it's at. It's your folate for your methylation, it's your minerals, they bind to heavy metals and a wide variety. So like aromatic herbs, super good for the thyroid. Dark leafy is great for calcium and alkalizing. And then all of your lettuces, like trying to get the wide variety. So I was like, oh great. I do a good job with lettuce. I love herbs. I buy kale and it dies in my fridge. I like don't get to so I started doing things like I would buy the kale, I'd make myself like blanch it really quick, break it up, blanch it, put it in the freezer. Then I would add it to soup sauces. I would just sneak it in wherever I could, smoothies. And so I started developing habits that would make that wide array of greens possible. So I always tell people greens that are frozen are fine. Like I'll get a bag of um, organic frozen spinach and put it in smoothies and sauces, and there's no prep to that, right? Uh,
Right.
plus, I saw a meme one time. It was like, here's a giant forest, and you've got this much spinach, right? And then you cook it, and it ends up this big. So
Right.
with the frozen spinach, it doesn't happen that because it's already been a little cooked.
Right.
That's just an aside. And then B is for beans because the digestive resistant starches in beans are so beneficial for the microbiome. And if beans make you gassy, typically is the good guys winning over the bad guys and a little die-off happening, but there are more beans that are more like digestible. So I'd say like the red lentils that have the hull taken off.
Yeah.
Awesome soups with that. Black beans, pressure cooked black beans are way more digestible. Navy beans, kind of softer beans versus like your kidney beans or your garbanzo beans, things like that.
I thought it was if you just soaked them before you cooked them for a long
On
time, you could make them more digestible.
Yes, that's there's so many layers to this
I
conversation.
know. I know. We're just touching like the tip of the iceberg on everything.
But but because you brought it up, we'll like answer that. So
Okay.
soak it, you get rid of the phytic acid, or it's more of the phytic acid, which is the anti-growth compound that keeps the seed from sprouting, right? So it's not meant it's you're meant to soak it off so you can actually digest it because it's not sprouting.
Okay.
And then pressure cooking it gets rid of the lectins, if you've ever heard of Dr. Gundry and the plant
Yep.
paradox. So there's that aspect of it. Um, that's about it for that.
Cool. Okay. So G is greens, B is beans. What's O?
O is onions, and that stands for sulfuric compounds. So like that could be garlic as well. And if you're sensitive to onions, that means your sulfication is a little off and that your methylation is a little off. So that's a neat little tidbit that I learned recently. There are other sulfur foods as well. But in essence, it's the is it allium family? And then M is for mushrooms. And for me, I just end up getting like I think there's a Sacred Seven mushroom powder that has like turkey tail and reishi and all that. I put it in my smoothie. That's just kind of an easier than buying mushrooms and trying to eat them. My family's not a huge fan, but they don't have any idea that that's in their smoothie.
Right.
I'm all about sneaky smoothies. And then B is for berries because the more polyphenols you have on board, the better. And then S is for seeds. And again, that's a huge uh, source of minerals, and they're detoxifying for the liver. They're typically not allergenic like nuts. And what else about seeds? Oh, they're hormone regulators. There's a magic combination. You can actually, so we'll save time. you can go on my website and go to the first under education, the blog that's on top is about seed cycling for
Very
home.
cool. So I'm curious, is it, should we always eat these raw? I mean, obviously not the beans, but the vegetables and the onions and the mushrooms, um, berries, seeds, like should we always choose raw over cooked?
No, I wouldn't do raw mushrooms, honestly. I would cook those. There's some compounds. I can't remember. Dr. Weil is where I learned that um, that we shouldn't be eating raw mushrooms, and then probably molds. I don't know. Um, and then the berries, I think, that's when you heat things, you're going to lose things that are heat sensitive, like vitamin C, but you're going to retain things that are not heat sensitive, like minerals. And there are certain polyphenols that I believe are more heat sensitive than others. So I still make berry cobblers. I still, cook with like, blueberry muffins, things like that. And then I eat them raw as well. Seeds are like beans. It's better and more digestible if you soak them because of the phytic acid aspect. And so for
Hmm.
me, other than flax, I don't think you don't have to soak flax. And if you do, it gets really gross, like kind of slimy.
Yeah, it kind of like I used to put flax in before I understood what flax did. I would put it in my kids' oatmeal, and yeah, it just makes it slimy. It's gross.
Yeah. So I actually just another easy button, right? Is Costco has, I think it used to be Go Raw was the brand, but they have another version of it. So it's just organic, soaked and sprouted pumpkin seeds that are then dehydrated again. I used to do all of that when I was raw vegan. Oh my gosh. I'd soak the seeds, I'd dehydrate the seeds. Like it was like a full-time job. Now I just buy them that way.
That's awesome. Well, that gives us some really a great place to start. So that's really super
And
cool.
you can just Google Dr. Furman and G bombs and find awesome articles about the whys that are even more behind G bombs.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Okay, so how do you, I'm curious, what's your routine? What do you typically do for your own health benefit and for that of your family?
Yeah. Well, when I'm taking care of myself,
Right. Exactly. Because
right?
it's hard to be perfect all the time.
I
Nobody's
will say
perfect,
that,
right?
like, I just want to, be vulnerable and let people know that, I'm a hot mess at times, right? Where right now we're buying a commercial building. My husband wants to start a gym and a jujitsu studio. He's done being retired, which I'm glad for. He was kind of miserable. You have to kind of like he was special forces, lots of things going on, right? And I was really glad he took several years off, but I knew retirement wouldn't last for him because he's such a busybody. So I'm really happy
Right.
that he's decided on what the next thing is, right? But that's been full time. So like forget my routine because we're like,
Right.
oh, we got to get this new paperwork. We're working with the Small Business Association. So it's like there's so many layers to that. Anyhow, all of that aside, just know that life can get out of whack, but you can always bring yourself back into balance. So my balance is I get up in the morning and I'll usually have just some water and I sit in the sauna. That's kind of our morning routine. My husband and I have that time. We kind of, set up our day. And then I will come and I will get something like hot to drink. And I'm actually looking up here. I'm in my little, so we live tiny, we live on a farm. This is my closet camper slash my space. I can lock the door. We live in a
That's
tiny house.
awesome.
Everybody has their own camper. We're building the big house in a couple years, probably. Anyway, so I have my gelatin because that's really helpful for healing and sealing the gut. And I tend to just have more of a leaky gut because of all the things. And I do my matcha and I do a little bit of like MCT powder, coconut stuff, and just make this yummy hot drink. So I have a healthy fat and a protein right away. Because a lot of women try to intermittent fast and then they end up not eating till noon and they haven't had their fat and protein that sets their hormones up for success for the day. And so then their adrenals are like, hey, they get that 3 o'clock fast. So
Yeah.
I start my day with that. And then I'll try to do a smoothie or like eggs and veggies, more like I would say, 10 or 11. Um, and lunch is typically like a big, hearty salad. Sometimes I'll do like a lettuce wrap full of some sort of protein or something like that, avocado, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Dinner is typically some sort of casserole soup, what have you. I'll put like black bean chili in the Instant Pot and have that ready for us. And then that's again another green salad. So we'll do, and sometimes like if it's chili, I'll put like a huge handful of super greens in it and put the hot chili over it and eat it that way. So that's our
That's awesome.
and
I
sauerkraut.
like and sauerkraut. Okay, my husband, I'm just I cannot get on board the sauerkraut. I know it's good for you, but I really struggle with that. I mean, he opens it up and I'm like, I can't even
Yeah.
stand the smell of it.
So I love that you say that because so people, it's kind of my litmus test. Sometimes I'm like, how do you feel about sauerkraut? And if I get
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, we have a little bit more yeast to deal with because it reacts with yeast in the body, in the mouth, and it tastes really bad to people with yeast. And if you haven't even gotten past tasting it, just know it smells entirely different than it tastes, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, okay, that is okay. I will try it.
Okay.
I will try it.
And the starter sauerkraut for people that are like going, oh, I don't know, is Bubby's. It's more crunchy. It tastes more like a pickle than
Okay.
it is like it's not as slimy as some of the other krauts. Um, and it's actually fermented longer than most krauts, so there's even more benefit.
Yeah, my husband, he likes this kind that we get at Costco. It's not bottled. I mean, it's like bottled like in the refrigerator section, so
Wild
it's
brine.
not like heat bottled.
Yeah, it's called wild brine, and they have a contract with Costco. And I love wild brine. It's organic. It's got typically has garlic in it too.
Yeah.
Um, But I will say a teaspoon of that has more probiotic metabolites than an entire bottle of probiotics. So it's hugely powerful.
Really?
And
Okay.
if you get bubbies, you can sneak it into a smoothie. Don't do that with wild brine because you'll have
Okay, no.
the
No, I
garlic.
don't think I could do that. Okay, I will definitely try that out and I will do it not just once. I'll try to do it consistent.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to try. I'm going to do it consistently and see what
I
happens.
sprinkle it on my salad. I sprinkle it like on my eggs. There's different, ways that you can not have to just don't do a spoonful by itself, right?
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Oh, okay. This is kind of a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm curious what your thoughts are on epigenetics.
Awesome
And
question.
so what are your and how can we manage, the impact of biotoxins and I guess we kind of talked about that, but what's your thought on the biotoxins and its effect on epigenetics?
Mhm. Um, just when we think it's complicated, then we have epigenetics, right?
Right, exactly,
Is it
right?
not expressed? Is it, and I love Dr. Ben Lynch wrote a book called Dirty Genes that I literally had sitting on my shelf for like 6 years, and I was like, that's too heavy. I don't want to read something like that right now. And
Yeah,
I'd read it back then because it's written like a novel. So he says, meet Melissa, and she has MTHFR, and he tells the story, and I'm like,
right.
this is awesome. Um, so you can have like if we're talking, do we want to talk about what MTHFR is really quick?
Yeah, because you've mentioned it before. So yeah.
So they theorize that about 85% of the population has this genetic mutation where I think it's methyl hydrofolate reductase, where in essence, these people are slower detoxers. Their methylation pathways can be off. They need more folate, so they need more greens than the average bear. And if they're doing things like eating folic acid in the diet, which is in every enriched thing, it's
Hmm.
on that folate receptor site and blocking the ability to absorb folate from the diet. And then, if we're eating folate and we're absorbing it, and then we're having to convert it to the active format of methylfolate, all of that's interrupted, right? So now there's a ton of correlation with autism spectrum, anxiety, depression, tongue lip tie, cleft lip, um, slow poopers, slow detoxers. The list is long. Angel kisses and stork bites are a sign of it. If you have I had like a little butterfly on my forehead when I was born that went away, but
Hmm.
that was one of the signs that I had it. And then some people have like their right above their tailbone, like a little dimple that never filled in, and that's kind of like a neural tube defect in
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So those are all signs of MTHFR. And there's a lot. Oh gosh, this is a much longer conversation, but that book is incredible. You can have a born dirty gene. It's like you have this genetic mutation, it's born dirty, but through diet and lifestyle, it will not express itself, right? So, and then you can have a completely clean gene, and through diet and lifestyle, it'll act dirty. So you're just like,
Interesting.
um,
Right.
so epigenetics is super fascinating because here's the other kicker, and this is why I'm kind of a mom on a mission to tell as many people as possible, get this message to our kids, because if you can have this good lifestyle before you get pregnant, you don't pass that gene on. You can have it down regulate. And I think this is probably why I mean, I don't know. I'm, kind of jumping a few ships over here probably, but my son, I didn't have my diet and lifestyle on point, but I did much more with my daughters, and they don't have all of the multi-susceptibility gene, right? So what if I downregulated that at the time? Who knows? It's a very long conversation, but if you want to dive in, it is Dirty Genes by Dr. Ben Lynch. If you have MTHFR, you can you can basically not have that expressed if your diet and lifestyle is on point. If it's not, you might want to take a methylated B vitamin and avoid folic acid, and avoid, for that matter, cobalamin. Do methylcobalamin, which is the B12 that's methylated. It's also a riboflavin deficiency. We can nerd out all day long on that one.
Right.
I comment on epigenetics. You can
Okay.
have a cancer gene that you don't pass on to your kids by making sure that genetic switch is
I
down.
didn't realize that you could switch them off
You
and
can.
then make it not transferable. So that's awesome. All right. So you have given us so much really amazing information. So if somebody wants to take it's the VCS test, right? Did I get that right? So if they want to take that test and have you go over that with them and get some more help from you, where can people find you?
They can go to april.emanuelson.com. So maybe you can put that in the description, but it's
Yep.
EMNUELSON.com. I'm the only April Emanuelson out there. Might be a problem for security someday, but pretty easy to find me. And if you scroll down to the bottom of my website, you'll see I've got, like, I think some mustard greens.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun picture.
Nice. Biotoxins whacking out your health. Follow that link, and you will get an email with the VCS test link and video instruction on how to calibrate it and how to do it. And then, kind of limited time, because I am getting a little flooded, which I love to talk to people, but I might need to start doing group coaching on this reading instead of one by one. But for now, you can still get me one-on-one. You can book 15 minutes with me and we'll go over your test. There's a lot of other things that we can do too, just like more expanded. I work with people all over the world, actually, where we can there's some pretty cool frequency medicine nowadays, and you can do a lot of that remote, which sounds really crazy, and I would have, like, never thought I would say that out loud, but there's some frequency of voice that actually can tell us things um, with Rife technology. So I actually offer that online, where we can kind of dive in even more and see, is there a frequency of mold in your body? Is there a frequency of Lyme? And then it gives us a direction to go to a certain extent.
Yeah, that was absolutely fascinating when I did that. So that was really, really super cool. I'm super excited to go deeper into that. So that's great. Any like parting words of wisdom? Like if you met somebody on the street and you told them what they did and they told you what they did, what words of wisdom would you share with that person?
I think ultimately, being a nerd, and you're kind of a nerd. It takes
I
one to
totally I own it. I totally own it.
we can get, like, kind of bogged down in the information, like what next
Yeah.
and what next and what next, and then
Yeah.
it's like we're so diluted, right?
Hmm.
it was pretty revolutionary. I was actually end of life care for one of my dear friends who had metastatic breast cancer, and it was everything that we could do in the end just to be there to support her as she transitioned. And when I came out of that, I was like, oh my gosh, like life is precious, first of all.
Yeah.
What? I don't want to live life the way I was because I can see where that could lead me. And for me, it was more like, just running hot on stress and all the, next, you never having downtime. Can't say that I'm really great about that. I'll still take on these big projects and then I'll have a big push, but I will also reset. So trust your intuition. Make sure you have time to sit quietly because that's when you get those messages. Could be mold. Maybe I should go
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
have divine guidance, and if you don't tap in and slow down enough, you're going to be running and missing the guidance in essence. And we can have all the knowledge in the world and still miss big glaring things like I feel like I did for years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if I had slowed down and tapped in a little bit more and listened to where I was being led, I would have found out those answers sooner. Who knows?
Yeah. It's there definitely is a learning curve of understanding how your body communicates to you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I will say one thing that I almost forgot to say. So I do lead retreats because I love to take a weekend with like incredible facilitators to really, because that was one of the first things I did after my friend passed. And it was so life-changing. Like I was like, I need to figure out how to be at a retreat every year at least. So I started a company.
you're like, I'm gonna make this happen.
So at our retreats, we do the scan. We have other facilitators there if there's generational trauma or if there's you're just totally in fight or flight all the time. People that can literally help you hardwire out of that. So I would absolutely say, find a retreat, find a place where you can check yourself out of your life and into care if you really are struggling. Get something that's comprehensive.
And can people learn about your retreats on your website also?
Yeah. So I think it's under events. So I
Okay.
have events and then something else I can't even remember.
Okay. Awesome. But I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's one, it's another way that people can tap into you, but also something simple that they can do for themselves as well. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, April. This has been absolutely amazing. I knew when I saw you speak at the Rejuvenate You retreat that I was just like, okay, I've got to have her on. I just think she's going to be absolutely amazing. And it totally was. So thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you.
It is fun. All right. Take care. Thank you so much. April has such a wealth of knowledge. It's just so fun to sit down with somebody like that and just tap their brain on just things that they know. And I know we couldn't go into super depth on this one single hour. And so I encourage you to look up April, do a retreat with her if you can, and really tap into that knowledge that she's got. I learned so much today, and I hope that you did too. And I hope that she was able to give some really great tips on how to live a clean life so that your rain barrel doesn't overflow. And I know that it can be so difficult because I think the thing that I struggle with the most is that it's so individual. And so what works for somebody doesn't necessarily work for me. And so there's a lot of trial and error, I feel like, that goes on. But here's what I've learned through my life. If I'm willing to try and fail, then I'm willing to try and learn. And just because you something doesn't work for you, that just means you know what not to do. And so you're going to progress. I think the key is just to keep going and to do what you can to eat correctly and employ some of those easy button things that April was talking about. And I have found for me that, when I do this stuff, I really do feel a lot better. I'm not saying I'm perfect and I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to improve in my own life, But I do feel like when I do catch on to something that is super beneficial and I really employ that in my life, it is worth it. It's worth the time and the effort to figure out how to incorporate that into my life. So I hope that you have found some benefit with this episode. Please check out April, and I'm going to have her contact information as well as she mentioned a couple books that I'm going to put in the show notes so that you have those links at ready at hand. So anyway, until next time, know that your purpose is in your story, just like April's. Until next time, take care.
Celebrate your dreams, let them take flight, for you are a star, shining bright in every step you take. Let your